Apologize for being late. Call the meeting to order. Becky, would you do the roll?
Jim Sheeline, Arlen McLean, Tom Kitson,
Present.
Larry Mamini,
Here.
Doug Farster,
Here.
Rick Humphrey,
Here.
Tim Bivens.
Here. All right. Everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes from Tuesday's meeting. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Kitson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. All right. On the agenda that I don't have pulled up.
I can help you with that.
Please do,
Jim, while you're
Wendy.
getting organized, on the agenda at 9 a.m. is an overview of the process we've gone through over the last year with regard to our health insurance. And we have our consultant Brad on the line. He's going to walk us through actually a presentation that kind of gives you a high level overview of what we've done over the last year and where we're at as of today. So Jim, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you, I'll kick it off to Brad.
Brad, thanks for being with us, and it's all yours. Floor is yours.
Great. Well, nice to meet you all virtually. Thanks for allowing this format to occur. I had some meetings this afternoon too, so the travel time didn't work out, but this hopefully works well. And how are we doing on time, Wendy? Maybe half hour, 45 minutes?
For your presentation, yes, we've set aside an hour for this topic. So
Okay, great. That I want to make sure that everyone can ask their questions too, so we have time for that. So everyone can see the screen okay, correct? Is that still showing up?
Yep.
All right, well, let's just dive into it. And at a very high level, I just want to talk about what the project really entailed. It had a few different phases, and we started in January. The very first phase was we wanted to see how the health benefits compared to other comparable entities in the area. And we looked primarily at different public entities, but we also were able to pull in some private entities, KSB Hospital and that type of thing. And in the packet of information that you have, I won't go through just for time's sake the benchmark, but it is in there. And I think the key takeaway is this. The plan that Lee County offers to employees is a generous plan, but really no more generous than what we see. It's comparable to other public entities. So it's in line with that. At the employee level, one of the real benefits is the low, what we call out-of-pocket maximum. So when you think about all the money a person's going to spend on deductibles and this thing called co-insurance, that cost sharing that people will have, at the end of the day, if they have pretty serious healthcare concerns, the plan has a low limit of exposure for that member. And so that was probably the real highlight of the Lee County plan. As you take a look at that, the member exposure was quite low with the out-of-pocket, which is a good thing. So if you're a member and you're facing high healthcare expenses, potentially this plan really protects that person. The other walk away as well, though, is we know healthcare is expensive for everybody, Lee County, and as well as all employees nationwide, pretty much. So the Lee County employee contribution was on the higher side of average from what we saw for singles and kind of right in the mix for families. But, you know, if you're a single person taking the coverage, you get great coverage, but it's not inexpensive to you. So that might be something you want to roll your eyes over later. And I think too, as we get to the end of today's conversation, there's some ideas that we have, because it sounds like some discussion on some missing components in the pricing so far that was brought up. And we're going to dive into more of that today, especially. So that was the first part. The second thing too, my background, I'm a health insurance underwriter by training. And so I joke, I was that person working for the insurance company for years in the cubicles, coming up with the rates, what the insurance company should charge employers. And I joked, I switched to the consulting side so I can use my skills for good and not evil, not working for the insurance company. But I think the key reason I bring that up, we knew we were going to take this plan out for market bids and see what the competition could do. But I always like to prep a group to know what they're in for. And I wanted the committee to see it how I see it from the eyes also what the insurance company's bidding on it will look like. So we'll talk at a very high level on what that looked like today as well. Number 3, I'll talk about the results of the bid process. And then we also shared in 4 and 5 kind of catch-all ideas throughout that process. So that gets us up to today. Earlier this past week, we presented effectively what you're about to see today to the insurance committee. any questions on this before I move on? I don't just assume that. all
So
this-
Brad, just real quick, so for the committee purposes, it is in the resource folder. So if you want to pull it up on your iPad, besides looking at a screen, it is there. So
Great.
go ahead, Brad. Thanks.
Great. And also too, obviously, with our time today is limited. If any of you have questions, reach out to me, or if it's easier to funnel that through Wendy, by all means, do that. I can go into more detail on any of these things that you might not want to bring up today in the group. All right. So one of the first things I wanted to take a look at in the pool that Lee County is a part of, it's called the IPBC, Intergovernmental Personnel Benefit Cooperative. You know, there are various pools throughout the country that government entities can join. This is one of the larger ones in the state of Illinois. So, you know, if I'm in your shoes, I want to make sure, is this a solid entity that you're a part of? Because no matter if you're getting a quote unquote good deal or not, does it have stability and staying power for the long run? And so I by no means hold myself out to be an accountant, but I am a person that's been in the business about 30 years, and I've seen my fair share of health plans that are well positioned financially, those that are not well positioned, those that are growing, those that are not growing, and I want to give my 2 cents on that. So as I dove in, every year they do audited financials. So that's first of all an important step, you know, for legitimacy. But behind the scenes, this grouping that you're a part of is made up of just under 150 members. And when you think about a member, that's different government entities. You know, it could be cities, counties, you name it, throughout Illinois. It's growing. So that's always a good sign. The governance that they have is a formal governance that actually members. So for example, Lee County could be asked to serve being on their board, but they also hire professional management people that are in the business that know how to calculate rates and so forth. But also too, and I won't bore you with all this, but all this is publicly available. They do have a very strong financial position, a very strong cash reserve. So for the foreseeable future, the next few years, if even that's our scope that we're taking a look at, I don't have any concerns that this entity will not be around because of solvency issues. They have very strong financial positions. But I just share that because, like I said, that's the foundation for if you decide to stick with them, you want to make sure it's stable. And we've all seen plenty of stories in the news with associations that are versus those that aren't. I feel very comfortable about that aspect of this one. All right, so now let's dive deeper. Still at a high level though, when you think about when you're finding an entity to cover the risks that you have, and the risk that you have on the health plan is really your health plan claims, and you also have to find someone to process those claims. And from a very high level, when we take this out to bid, or when we took this out to bid, insurance companies looking at your plan are going to say quickly, can they make money by having you as a client? And one very simple thing they will take a look at is something we call a loss ratio. But it's a very, actually, besides the terms that we throw around, what does that mean? Well, they're going to look at the dollars paid out in claims to doctors, hospitals, pharmacies, and so forth. And then they're going to compare that to the dollars coming in that Lee County collectively is paying in premiums. That includes the employee portion and the employer portion overall. And so if those ratios are over 100%, that means for every dollar you pay in premium, they're paying out more in claims. And that doesn't even cover all their fixed overhead and things like that. So I look at the past 3 audited financials for Lee County, 2 of the past 3 years, that loss ratio has been over 100%. So I knew going into this bid process, we probably weren't going to get a lot of competing markets real interested in that, because candidly, you've really benefited by being a part of this pool. Other pool members are subsidizing you versus the opposite. Now, that's a good thing for Lee County. You've received really the best value you could. We know over time that can change as well. So if you have like the 7/19 or July 19 through June 2020 year, making some money, you were actually doing the opposite. You were subsidizing other pool members. And if you have a number of years that looks like that, then I have a feeling this process might be smart to embark on again. But at least at a high level, this is the past 3 full years. And then 2, I'm going to switch slides. This was the year-to-date loss ratio. And it's actually at the highest level we've seen in not only the prior 3, the most current was running pretty high. And overall, the trust is hoping to get pretty close to 100%. It's a not-for-profit entity, so they're not looking to make much margin on that. But I'll stop there too. Does the loss ratio discussion make sense for everybody and how that works?
So Brad, this is Wendy. So just to restate that for clarity's sake. So in the current year to date, it's a fair statement to say that our actual expenses, claims, pharmacies, medical, have exceeded our premium payments by 34.3%. Is that an accurate statement?
That is. And I would say tack on another, if you think about it from the pool's point of view, they have additional fixed costs like hiring employees to process claims and that type of thing. So probably add another 15% on top of there, for them to be made whole. So you've gotten a good deal. So as my client, as we go through this, I'm happy for the deal that you have, but at the same time, knowing that it probably is going to limit what market options there were.
So Brad, and this is Jim, when you go out for bid, do they look at just a 3-year history, or do they look at a longer history? Because you can see how volatile our claim experience has been, especially this last year. How far do they actually go out when they put together bids? Yeah,
and most commonly they will look at actually just 2 years, and they'll put the most weighting to the most recent 12 months. And the logic is, right or wrong, underwriting theory throughout the country is the population covered over this past 12 months is most
Brad, we lost you.
Oh, you did? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, got you back. Thanks.
Okay.
So restate that.
Okay, yep. So insurance carriers will look over a 2-year period most typically, but they'll put the highest weighting on the most recent 12 months. And the reason for that is the claims that they expect to generate over the next 12 months are most likely going to be that same population that just had claims most recently.
Hey, Brad.
Yes?
We lost you again.
Isn't that strange?
Are you connected wirelessly? It's saying that there's an unstable internet connection, and I don't believe it's on our end because we're connected via cable.
Yeah, can you hear me? I've got a cable connection as well. That's strange.
We're going to try this one more time because you're back again. We'll give it one more shot here.
Okay. Okay, let's see. And can you hear me okay?
Yep.
That is so strange. Yeah, on my end, I'm seeing everything, but that's the joy of computers. Is there a call-in number, worst case, just so, Wendy, I've got your cell phone, but that obviously wouldn't work for the room.
Yeah, and we don't have a phone in this room, a phone line in this room, so it may end up having to be a cell phone, Brad, but let's give this a shot because you're back stable again. You're not fading again, so I'm hoping that whatever it was a short-term issue.
All right, we'll cross our fingers. So the quick version of the question is they'll look at 2 years of data, but they'll put the highest weighting in the most recent 12 months because that population is most likely to be the population that's going to drive the claims over the next year. So your most recent 12 months had high losses, if that makes sense. And so, they really feel beyond those 2 years with turnover and that type of thing, they don't put a lot of weighting beyond that. Does that help?
Yeah, that answered my question. Thanks.
Yep, you bet. And let's see. So moving on then. So a couple things are going on while we're doing the bid process. Actually, we received the renewal rates from the pool, and the rate increase effective in July was 7.9%. And while no one likes to see a rate increase, when you think about the losses that occurred, and not only this current year to date, but the prior year, it was actually pretty fair. And this is where the benefit, I think, of the pool comes in. When you're not having the best year or years, the pool comes to help you. The converse is also true. You know, if you're having great years, you're not going to get the full benefit of that great experience. But that's, you know, kind of the pro and con of joining something like this. But definitely over the past few years, Lee County has won more than Lee County has lost in this. But we knew that, so those costs were going up. And you'll note, and I'll just point out something too, you're going to see something that notes an 18-month rate. What they did, just kind of a one-time thing, today the renewal is given and effective in July. So these rates that you're seeing on this column are being charged today to Lee County, July and August. But typically, the way Lee County has done it, they haven't extended that to employees, the rate to employees, until January. And so there's been that delay. So to simplify that process, they agreed to an 18-month renewal such that future renewals are going to occur in January versus July to take care of that. But all the numbers you're going to see in the packet that I go through are annual 12-month numbers. So I just want to point that out. They're not 18-month total spending. It's a 12-month spending, but I'm showing you rates that actually apply for more than 12 months, if that makes sense. But I think a key thing we're going to spend our time on, this excludes the cost of this Envision program, and this will make more sense in a little bit. So we went out to market, but I want to paint a picture for how the market is set up in Illinois. This is the market share of the largest insurers in the state. Blue Cross dominates. They're represented almost 73% of the larger group market. So Envision employers with 50 or more employees, they cover 73% of those. So we definitely wanted to make sure we got a quote from them. Fortunately, they were agreeable to do it. United Healthcare makes up the second largest slice, but it's a distant second. Quad Cities has a lot to do with that because of John Deere. John Deere was one of the key reasons behind UHC's growth in the area, because they actually owned a health plan. And then we've got Carl Holdings, which is also known as Health Alliance, Carl Clinic, and then all others. So this is the market we're looking at. So the pool you're in today taps into Blue Cross's network, which from the survey of the group, we found that people were comfortable with the doctors that they had access to and those types of things. So that was positive. But we wanted to see, hey, let's go get quotes in this marketplace. So here is the various carriers that we approached. And just for time's sake, I will summarize this. So to no surprise, right out the gate, we had a number of carriers that decided to decline. Aetna was one of those, and I included the commentary in case you want to read that. They use this term DTQ, decline to quote. It's just a nice way of saying, hey, we can't make money on this, so we're going to pass. And they're for-profit entities, so obviously they have the right to do that. Aetna came back with that, as did Cigna, as did Humana right off the gate. And then they also asked, they said, we'll be willing to relook at this if you give us additional information that shows that things are maybe trending better. Well, unfortunately, the updated information we had actually made it look like things are trending worse, not better. So it didn't make sense to pursue that one again. Blue Cross did provide a quote, which is actually the one I was most interested in anyhow. So we're going to be spending time to go through that. Health Alliance, United Healthcare still have yet to respond. They've had it over a month. So sometimes failure to respond is also kind of a soft way of declining. We followed up with them and still nothing. So I'm happy to share if they do come back with something. But I think for the sake of this, the group had to decide for September 1st if you're staying with the pool or going to something different. So that's why we had such a tight time frame on this. Not to bore you with details, but we did make sure on the quotes that we're quoting apples to apples, or as close as we could get apples to apples. The plan that you're buying from the pool has a $6,000 deductible for an individual, and then $12,700 for families. You might be saying, wow, that's not what I'm familiar with our employees getting as a benefit. You'd be correct, because Envision buys those benefits to make them more generous behind the scenes. But the plan you're actually buying from the pool has those higher limits on it. And so if we take a look, Blue Cross, I just switched slides, it looks very similar. Blue Cross's plan had a $6,000 deductible on it, so right in line, and had a $12,000 family deductible on it. So actually slightly more generous than what you had today. But other than that, everything else matched up just fine. And so now let's look at some of the numbers. So how I have this set up, we have different ways people can buy insurance. They could do employee only, employee spouse, child and family. And this is the head count of the employees that have selected each option. So you have about half your population take single coverage. We've got the rates that were in place with the pool. And then this 18-month rate, as we talked about, this is the renewal rate. So that's 7.9%. And this is an annual spend. So $2.1 million. So that's an increase overall of $154,000 over a 12-month window, of which some of that will be cost shared with employees. In yellow is the quote we received from Blue Cross. And you'll notice that they quoted September 1st through next August. You might be wondering, why did they do that? Well, the challenge is because we had to get quotes so early, it was too soon for them to quote a January 1st effective date. So we had to have them quote an effective date that they could. And so they quoted September. But I'll show you how we adjust for that in just a moment. But overall, those rates were a little bit less than what you're paying today, which was interesting, but it still called for an increase. So instead of a 7.9% increase, it was calling for a 5.1. So just roughly under $100,000 a year increase if you went to Blue Cross directly outside of the pool. But this is not apples to apples. If we look at the far right, we would still have to go back to Blue Cross if you said, I really like this quote, let's fine tune it. Well, we'd have to fine tune it for January 1st. To do that, you effectively have to increase the quote by what they call trend, which is a cost of living factor for healthcare expenses. Right now, carriers are using about a 10% annual trend factor. We'd have to trend it 4 months. I don't want to make anyone turn into an underwriter right here, but the gist of it is 4 months of that.
Hey, Brad, we lost you again.
Oh no. Can you see my screen?
Brad.
Yes. Yep. I don't know if you can hear me still.
Totally lost him.
Oh no. Can you see my screen? Hello? 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 Can you hear me? Now I see Lee County is muted. If you can hear me.
Okay, now can you hear us, Brad?
I can. Wow, this
So
is
the
strange.
instability is clearly on our side. We completely lost and came back in again. So we left off with you describing the 10% annualized and what that would look like if we were to go with a January 1 to a December 23 quote.
Great, got it. Okay. So great segue. And so what I did, I just adjusted these rates by 2.5% to estimate what Blue Cross's January 1st quote would look like. And when you do that, it's effectively where your renewal was without switching. And so whenever I see this, there's a fair amount of pain for a group to switch. And there's not, 0.2% savings to me did not justify going through all that effort. And the committee also agreed with that. But I wanted you to see behind the scenes how that stacked up. And keep in mind too, as we're going to get to in a second, this excludes the cost of that Envision program that we'll talk about. So, just an apples to apples quote, the pool made sense for the underlying insurance that you buy. But now let's talk about the second piece of this. We buy the insurance that we just looked at through the pool, but there's also this Envision piece. And can you hear me okay? Just doing a check now periodically, given the technical. Okay.
Yep, we've got you. Thanks for checking though.
Yeah, you bet. So, so what do those rates cover? Well, sometimes a visual helps. So these are the renewal rates that you are paying through the pool right now for the next 18 months. It buys you, as we talked about, a $6,000 deductible for individuals and just a little over 2 times that for families. So it's just buying you that. But employees are not facing this as a plan. Employees kind of cross all that out. employees get the benefit of Envision through your dollars that you're spending to buy down those high deductibles to, very reasonable deductibles, $500 per individual, twice that per family. And in a worst case scenario, after you've paid your deductible, a person's going to pay 30% of what's next, up to the out-of-pocket maximum that includes the deductible. So imagine having a very severe healthcare event. That individual is capped at $1,400. That could be whether there's a $50,000 heart attack that they have, or all those different, there's some very expensive drugs out there. It does not matter. That person individually is capped at $1,400. And families, if they have multiple family members, in total, let's say I was in this family and I had significant healthcare expenses. Once I hit $1,400 in the family, I'm done. We'll say Wendy, let's use Wendy as example. Let's say she's in the family as well. Let's say she hits her $1,400 as a family member. If anyone else in our family has expenses, there's zero additional out of pocket for the rest of the family, because the family spent $1,400 on Brad and $1,400 on Wendy. So you hit that $2,800. So that's a protection on this end. But there's a cost to that protection. It's not free, obviously, to buy those deductibles down from those high levels down to very, very generous levels. And so what we did, and this is hard to see, but let me just talk through what we did. So instead of having those two elements where you're buying, kind of the high deductible from the pool, and then you're paying Envision to buy that down, what if we just had the pool provide a plan that covered it all, so that claims didn't have to really go through two different sets of processing, just one. And that's really all this is showing, that they quoted an apples to apples plan that what you have today, and you won't be able to see that on the screen, I understand. But what was interesting, again, in the blue represents your renewal rates, but I added a few different components. So this is the total that we had shown a few slides ago in terms of just the insurance expense. But you are also spending this past year, you had about $340,000 in claim expense that Lee County paid to buy down those benefits to be more generous. Plus we had to pay Envision to process that. So your total cost, if you will, about $2.45 million. If we bought that plan directly from the pool without having that Envision component, but making the plan itself more generous that you're buying, your insurance costs would go way up by about 49%. And again, this is above the renewal. This isn't above the rates that just expired. You would not have an Envision cost component because they wouldn't exist. It's all up here. But what was interesting, it would be an additional $679,000 on top of the renewal expenses that you have. So, we talked to the committee about that. While the process in place is confusing to some employees, and I think some communication work needs to be done to help employees understand really just how good of a benefit it is. It can get confusing because they submit a claim to the pool first, gets processed, and then it has to get reprocessed by Envision. But there's a huge savings to continue doing that, and this validated that process. Any questions so far? Is that making sense? I know we're covering a lot very quickly.
Any questions from the committee? Yeah, Rick, go ahead.
Did you run that scenario with eliminating Envision strictly through Blue Cross Blue Shield to see what the rates would be for that under that scenario, or was it just through the IPVC?
Great question. Yep. So I also ran it through Blue Cross Direct that we had a quote with as well. And I'll show you that. I think that is coming up. Yep. That's coming up next.
Perfect.
Yep. So great segue. So because Blue Cross was able to provide a quote, and again, they provided a September 1st quote. I had them quote a plan as close as they could get to what the members have today. So on this side, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around. This is the plan that employees get today after the Envision component. Now, Blue Cross in your size segment, if we go to them directly, they just have a menu of off-the-shelf plans. We can't customize it. But then an option that I found was about as close as we could get, was able to match the deductibles. The co-insurance, once you've met your deductible, is actually a little more generous than today. Then instead of the member paying 30%, they'd only pay 10%. But they would spend a little more in out of pocket. But effectively, that's about as close as we get. What's interesting, though, too, And these are September 1st rates, even without even going through the trending process. That was also higher, maybe slightly better than buying it through the pool, but it was an additional $538,000 more than if you continue renewing with the pool plus keeping Envision in that process. So it just, two different ways we looked at it, just didn't pencil out. And I will say this, I refer to what you're doing as partial self-funding. It's not full-blown self-funding. It's just a part, because you're still buying a fair share of protection from the pool, but a small piece you are going through Envision to do. I do think that generally that does save groups money. It does create some complexities, but if you buy those same plans directly from the insurance company, that's where a lot of their profit margin is. That's where a lot of, the reason for this increase would be. So whether we looked at IPBC to do that, or even just direct, it did not pencil out. Does that make sense? All right, now let's kind of finish up with some things. So, that the portion of the plan that Envision covers really comes out of your bank account, Lee County, and it's based on claims presented. And like health insurance, you never know which years are going to be good or bad. This shows you the expenditures that you've paid Envision just on claims for the past 3 plan years. So, and it's been going up, 304,000 in 2019, 310. Last year was the highest year yet. Now, it's difficult to say, how 2022 will end up, but I think it's fair to say for budgeting that we should at least look at taking that as at least our budget number, and Winnie and I can fine tune this behind the scenes. But I think there's a bigger point to all this that I'm getting at with this. So if we take a look at your renewal rates that you're buying from the pool, we're having to pay Envision about $7 per employee per month. And through the course of the year, that's a little over $11,000. And even if I just took the expenditure that you had in the highest year, this past year, and this doesn't even trend that forward, so there could be an argument that maybe we should add a little trend to that figure. We've got a little time to figure this stuff out. But I just took the highest one just to be safe. Your total expense is not the 2.1, it's the 2.458. And so, and this is before employee cost sharing. So employee contributions today on the various union contracts are based on the rate. And as Wendy will talk about, it's kind of generalized wording, a lot of those things. But today it's just based on this. But if we were to increase those rates for your true costs, these rates really have to go up about 16, almost 17%. And I have the math here. Really, you divide this total that you need to cover by what you're currently charging, and that makes up that difference. Let me put it in a way that probably makes a little more sense too. So July 1st rates that won't go into effect for employees until January, they're going to pay 25% of just those pool rates, which equates to this. But we really need to inflate those if you want to truly reflect costs and have them participate in the real expense, another 16.7%. So that would mean instead of 194 for single, 226, and you can see how those play out. Now it's obviously it's an internal decision by Lee County how you want to handle that. There's probably a variety of things you could do. You could have discussions with each of the unions and say we were not accounting for this in prior years. Do we need to? And if so, should cost sharing be based on this total? The math would support that, especially going back a couple slides, knowing that if you didn't do this component, you're going to pay a lot more from buying that level of generous plan directly from an insurance provider. Sorry, I don't want to make you sick as I scroll back through the slides. The other thing you could take a look at is what's the value of that. Continue to base your cost sharing just on the overall high deductible insurance rate that you have. But this is the benefit to the employee. by not charging that additional 25% on the Envision component. It works out to be over the course of the year about $390 savings for that employee on single, a little over $1,100 for family coverage. You know, you could structure it such that if you want the current program that we have today and the benefits of Envision, you get that. If you don't want that and you want to save some money on your insurance, we can give you just the core plan that we're buying from the pool, and then we could put these monies into a health savings account or something that you can use when you have healthcare expenses. That would probably appeal to those that are not high utilizers, would be my bet. And so, but that's something that could be worked out. And I will say this is probably conservative, because keep in mind the Lee County is picking up 75% of that difference. Employees, if you extended this kind of back to them, only pick up 25%. These numbers could go up because you're avoiding all that extra claim cost, but at the same time, you've got lower utilizers of the plan. So you don't want to give dollar for dollar credit on what Envision costs, because those folks are probably not the ones driving that $340,000. The ones that are driving that are probably going to stay with the Envision program. The ones that aren't would be more attracted to higher deductible but lower payroll deduction. So I think, yeah, that's my last slide. We're at roughly 9:40. Let's open it up for questions.
Questions for Brad? So one question I have Brad, was in the and it's not reflected here because it's probably deeper in the details, but there was an FSA component in the current plan that is not being very well utilized. I think if I remember right, Wendy, 7 employees were utilizing the FSA portion. Does the plan allow? Is that still allowed within the newly in the new quote that FSA component? And then would there be any advantage, disadvantage, or ability to change that from an FSA component to an HSA component?
Yeah, good question. So didn't spend a lot of time on that, but I was briefed on some of the difficulties the plan had to scramble with earlier this past year on that. So the plan that you're buying from the pool today is eligible to use a health savings account, which is really, in my opinion, a better version than what a flexible spending account is. And I won't bore everybody with the details, but to do that, the government says to open up a health savings account, which is a bank account in that person's name that they can take with them if they leave Lee County, versus a flexible spending account that is not something they can take with them. The government says to get those extra advantages, you cannot buy the deductible down to the generous levels that you do today. So buying it down to that $500 deductible doesn't allow that person to open up a health savings account. However, if that person said, I don't want the Envision component, I just want the $6,000 deductible, and that's it, then the person legally could open up a health savings account. So the plans that we quoted allow you to either continue with your flexible spending account or do a health savings account, with the exception of the only folks that can do the health savings account, they can't get the Envision component because it would preclude them just with some regs. So a long answer to your question, it both allow it. We just have to be careful how it would be rolled out.
Rick,
This is
thank
more
you
of a
for
que-
that, Brad.
This
You
is
bet.
more of a question for us internally here, but the employee's contribution is 25%. Does that carry through for a family and employees and spouse and all that? I mean, it's straight across the board, 25%, regardless of which plan.
25%, right? With the exception of the Envision piece, of course.
And then retirees, I can't remember what their contribution level was.
Their contribution level should be 75% or 100%, depending.
Depends. I think the FOP contract has
75.
75, but some of the other contracts have 100.
And do we find, I noticed on here, we have some retirees, so apparently we have some people utilizing it.
Yeah, just from remembering the census that I had seen, there aren't a significant number, but I don't know, Wendy, would you say maybe 6 or 7 retirees out of 137-ish?
Yep, I was going to say less than 8 for sure, but yeah, 6 to 7 probably retirees. Brad, we've got insurance committee member Tom Kitson in the room, not to put Tom on the spot, but is there anything you'd like to add in terms of the overall process and how you think it went?
I think it went real well, and covered some things. And we know that the employees are not paying their share of the Envision, but as we look at it, it's not that big a number. And we did this probably 5 to 6 years ago. We made the change. And since then, we have changed some contracts from 27% insurance payment to 25%. I think it's very difficult for us to go back and say we negotiated this, we let this be dropped, and now we want to add Envision back on. And I think we're looking at what, $80,000 a year is hey, which $80,000 is a lot of money compared to a lot of other things we do. It's minuscule. And we have, the insurance committee has asked in the past, previously, the people from the company would come into our insurance meetings and report to us. And they have not done that since COVID. They've had some reports on the phone. We've asked they come in, we've asked they give us some idea why our numbers are so high. Our previous contract person would come in and say, well, you had 2 heart attacks, you had 3 cancers. Everybody in that room knew who those people were, and it almost puts a target on their back, which is not right. So we've asked if they come in and say to us, hey, COVID really hit you guys bad, or this is a, kind of, so we've got some ideas where we're going to see what our trend's going to be. And hopefully they'll be in at our next meeting, which would be, in the fall.
Yeah, what we've discussed is, again, having some of that aggregate data that might be useful in helping us understand exactly where the issues are. The conversation was it COVID related, which there was probably some of that. But if we get some aggregate numbers, at least it might bring about an awareness of what's causing those higher costs.
Tom's point, I guess the only thing that I would, add is that, while it's relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of things of 80,000 this year, but if we go next year and it's another 80,000 and then another 80,000, at some point in time, if 25% is what the employees are supposed to be paying, we need to address it. I'm not saying it has to be this year, but as we all know, health insurance costs continue to go up, and at some point in time, we just can't keep putting that on the backs of everybody else. So, and we need to cost share whatever our true cost is my belief.
So this was the entire point of this exercise today and throughout the last year, is to better understand our health insurance costs and to bring awareness to the issue or the topic of the Envision piece of it. What Brad and I talked about is that this is a policy decision of this board to decide exactly how to go forward. We do need to keep in mind, however, the union contracts that we've got. And this may be something that, based on our attorney's representative, whether it be state's attorney or union representative, we need to talk with them about any possibility of discussing this going forward.
So to follow up with that, I guess my question is right now we're looking at $340,000 approximately for Envision. Is this an open-ended? If we get a catastrophic situation, that we could be faced with $1 million or who knows the number.
That is correct.
And to me,
Now,
that
wait. So I don't think that's entirely correct.
Well, it's
So
open-ended. That's what's correct, is that the amount we're going to pay Envision each year is entirely dependent upon the number of employees that have health issues and the amount of deductible that those employees are going to need to use.
Right, but remember that once they hit the $6,000 deductible, then the Blue Blue Cross Blue Shield component kicks
Right, so
in.
you're right,
So
there's a
our
cap on it.
exposure is not the million.
Well, I guess
So
that's what I'm
our-
looking
our
at. What's our
exposure would
actual
be-
exposure?
Yeah, our exposure would be
Case
that
scenario,
136 employees all get sick at the same time.
times 12 though.
Yeah, times,
Times
yeah.
times
by
$4,600.
That deductible, whatever that deductible that
Well, no,
family
I
would
mean, if-
choose.
Worst case scenario, if you got a family coverage, you got times 2.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at what's the worst case scenario. I mean,
Right.
granted, the chances of it are probably slim to none, but
Right, but the exposure to the county would be that piece between what we guarantee in the employee deductible and the
I know what that
$6,000.
number is, so I guess that's what I just
Right.
asked.
Suppose theoretically, it could be pretty close to. I'm thinking 750, 800,000 is probably where you're gonna top out if everybody
And then-
covered by our insurance got sick and used their complete deductible.
Sure. But I just-
Yeah, and I don't know if you want the math of it, when we looked at the demographics of the group, every employee that says they want coverage, some take single, some take family, but there is about 2 members covered on the plan for every employee that elected it, is the average. So, I mean, imagine COVID or a pandemic where every single person was hospitalized, right? Every single person, which we saw through COVID, that's not the case, but imagine worst case scenario, every single person, every single member, I should say, is hitting $6,000. It would be $6,000. That's an annual worst case. And then after that, Blue Cross would pick it up. I'm going to take that times 137 employees. And I'm going to take that times 2 because there's 2 members for every employee. So, I mean, you're in an absolute worst case, your exposure is 1.64 million. But then
Brad,
Yeah.
the county's really only picking up 4,600 of that 6,000 because the employees are picking up the first 1,400.
yeah, good point. Good point. Yep, that's a really good point. Yep, so really, yes. But that's kind of the math, how you go about it. But, the real difference between a good year and a bad year for a group is typically the number and quantity of large claims. And it's not the $6,000 claims that, can make, often you have, most people actually don't use the health insurance to a great degree. Is a few people use it a lot, and then that's what drives your loss ratios. And you're capped at that $6,000 limit per person. So I wouldn't probably put a lot of weighting in your absolute worst case. I think it's smart to bring up that the 340 is by no means a ceiling, but I think to go a whole lot beyond that probably isn't statistically likely, if that helps.
But it's good, like you say, it's good to understand what our total exposure on that piece is year over year.
I guess then I would just ask, I mean, and maybe there isn't such a thing, is there actual insurance coverage for that gap in there where we could maybe pay a little bit more and know that that's the most that we're gonna see? And I'm just asking that. I mean, we're kind of self-funded in this middle section. I understand that, but I didn't know if there was insurance out there that you could buy for that middle coverage.
Yeah, and that would be something we'd have to check with Envision. It's not a real common thing just because most don't buy it, so there hasn't been a real big market for it. I have seen from time to time, so Envision's what we call a third-party administrator. I have seen from time to time a few have offered what they call an aggregate insurance on that, just to make sure, worst case, that you're protected.
But Brad, didn't you, in going to Blue Cross Blue Shield and looking at a full coverage plan, kind of do that in a sense, maybe not exactly the way Rick presented, but that difference in cost between a full coverage plan, Blue Cross, and a full coverage plan in the pool, that kind of shows us the direction that would lead us.
I think that's a fair assumption, and knowing that Blue Cross ultimately wants to make money at it, so their budget number, that they extend, let's see here, they feel they could make money at just under $3 million, which is an extra $538,000 over what you're already budgeting for next year. So yeah, that tells me they feel comfortable. Now they want cushion in there. I think that's why this is higher. But like the casinos, insurance companies don't like to write business and lose. So they price it to win more often than they'll lose.
So going back to the HSA component, if we wanted to offer that, not, but we may not have anybody, is there any action that we need to take in regards to, offering that option to the employee of just going to the Blue Cross Blue Shield component?
Really, no. I think in terms of making it appealing, I think your group may want to consider, do you incentivize it and, to use kind of some of this, if you decide to kind of waive the envision piece for those that are currently on that, probably need to incentivize it. But you could, in the eyes of the pool, that's the only plan they know you're buying. And so behind the scenes, you could say we have plan 1 and plan 2. Plan 1 has the envision. Plan 2 does not. It's just the raw insurance. So you could do that for sure.
What? Brad, this is Paula again. Hi, by the way, I didn't say
Hey
hi
there.
earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that we could use the HSA if the county no longer picked up the envision, the self-insured deductible piece of $4,600.
Correct.
Because we couldn't put an HSA in for anybody whose out-of-pocket max is $1,400. It doesn't meet the IRS threshold, right?
Correct. Yep. And it's actually based on deductible even. So, yeah, but you're right. You're right.
Would there be any, you mentioned incentivizing, is there anything in ACA that would prohibit us from, what type of incentives? I'm trying to think that, we would kick in, one way to incentivize an HSA is that the employer would kick in $500 or $1,000 into their HSA account. Or something of that nature. Are we prohibited from doing that under ACA?
No, in fact, that's the most common. In fact, you hit upon, I would say, the from the hip benchmark. So most groups that fund it give people at least $500 for single coverage and about $1,000 for family coverage to help fund it. The ACA really there's a component that they just want to make sure it's not discriminatory. So for example, you can't give it to Brad, but not Paula if we both take single coverage. So as long as you're consistent offering that, you really have full discretion, and you're not required to do an HSA contribution, but you're not prohibited either from making it very generous. So there are caps as to how much with the IRS you can put into an HSA in a year. That might be your limit, but it's roughly $3,500 a year would be the most you could contribute to someone's HSA. But most groups aren't even anywhere close to that. I think the debate's often, should we do $500 for singles? Should we do $800? The really generous ones might be doing $1,000. And then for families, should we do $1,000 or $1,500? That's about where it peters out.
So Brad, if we went that direction, and how a natural question from an employee standpoint would be, okay, that sounds good as long as I'm healthy. HSAs work, but if I have a chronic illness, do I have the ability to go from an HSA and come back into the Envision program?
Yep. So you'd have to wait until kind of annual enrollment. So whatever election you make, you're stuck with that for a year. Or if you, oddly, having the birth of a child is a qualifying event that allows you to switch plans mid-year, but short of that, it's effectively a one-year decision. But if you decided after that year you didn't like it, you could come back to the more generous plan. You couldn't put new money into your health savings account, but you could spend down whatever you built up in there if you had some money left.
Well, maybe that's something that the insurance committee can take a look at and see if there's advantages. I see that the advantage of the health savings account is for your younger employees that are healthy, that they can bank money and have those and build that fund up over time. and could have some potential savings for the county as well, long term. It wouldn't be a fast thing. Any other questions for Brad? Okay, Wendy? Hearing none. Paula? Anything else? All right, Brad, do you have anything else for us?
I'm at your disposal if you have other questions that come up from this meeting. I think just some things to think about. Communication plan, regardless. I want to make sure if Lee County does decide to continue subsidizing Envision, that you're getting credit for that, that the unions and so forth know that that's really been something you've absorbed. And then I think too, maybe just Wendy and I will probably want to spend some time fine tuning whatever you decide to do. Then help fine tune what that Envision budget should be. You know, we'll take a look at the most recent claim data on that, just to see, does that $340,000 seem like a good budget? Do we want to put a little cushion there? But I think those are all things behind the scenes that we can work on. But thank you for your time. I hope this was helpful.
Well, thank you for the things that you've put together here. I really appreciate it. It's very clear, and you did a really good job step by step in laying this out and on a very complex subject that I'll tell you, I was always having a hard time getting my head wrapped around how Envision came into and how that all the pieces fit together. But the way you laid this out, Brad, was very good. Appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
All right.
Brad.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, now that our brains are full and probably something else, let's take a 5-minute break and before we get started on the next budget. So.
Mine was yours. Oh, wait, you're further back. Oh, no, come on down. Okay. Hit the button over there twice real quick. Oh, there you go. Now you go back. Okay. All right. Good.
And the 130 represents the number of people enrolled in the program. Is that right?
Sure.
Right. Keep in mind that of the 130 that are insured are employees, sometimes they have their spouses also have their kids. So and well, I don't remember what you had on this screen. So
What, so single coverage is about
Just curious.
that's 9,000 something, it's almost 10,000 a year total cost. Family coverage is like 25,000 a year. And the employee pays.
I just took that $2.4 million divided by 157. Just to get an idea.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. Is your family coverage less than
Very,
25 grand?
Yeah, very, very high deductible. 5,000. Well, I guess it's not. And to
They're on Medicare.
where they before they turn 65. They're 65, so what is that, 9 years? So I know what's not. I just want to get like an idea. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. I just wanted to get an idea.
No,
That's 75. 25.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying. The cost of county is he's not 4 times that. You know what I mean? Yeah. That was my point. It wasn't that we should do something. I know.
County pays it.
And it's something we already paid.
It's okay, I just want to get like that.
Yeah, no.
I should look at the.
So let's say I.
No. Well, no, but Rick, I'm not defending it. You can look at it, well, they gotta give them 6 years. too.
$500.
I don't like to stuff away from people.
No,
But at some point in time, when you're looking at,
Got it. Dang it, that, how I always share the box.
that makes sense.
It's 6,000.
At this point, it's 6,000.
Okay, that's where that.
Every
Hold on.
Yep.
See, that's why I got that here. Okay. Yeah, that's why I got it. Because I was like, oh,
Get them back.
So this is the
kind of
deductible.
crappy that. No force in paper points, so if they have a lot of savings. I should put those. That's why. And H is at each one, like FOP is different. This.
They're all at 25%. Some of them, several things are tied to FOA. Several contracts. are tied to it.
Another reason why I ask is because, like, you know, how people chatter in general, say, "Hey, you work for the government. you get-" Private, it would be about 15 grand, 17 grand for a family. But privately, I don't know. how many. But-
Oh,
Thank you.
let's go. And that doesn't. All the capital.
Treasure.
Was detained.
Yeah, we can go ahead and suggest it here. We've already done treasury. We're gonna actually light duty today. Oh, all right. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do Bob's.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could go.
Okay. The other one I like.
Right, so we can go ahead and do Bob's.
Yeah,
Sure.
before I do that, I've got up on the screen.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
All right. So we're just missing Doug yet, right?
Yep, we're missing Doug yet.
Am I there? Oh, yeah.
especially when something turns old.
Mm-hmm.
I might just go ahead and just get, because all I want to do is point them in the direction of the budget for the insurance.
Okay, yeah, all right. Let's get back into session and Wendy, go ahead.
So I've got up on the screen here and in your detail, general fund detail document that's in your resource folder, I just wanted to draw your attention really quickly to the health insurance. This is the expense side. So we do have a stipend that we're paying to an employee in the clerk's office to process when employees come in and out of the insurance. What's highlighted in green there is that insurance deductible that the envision piece of this, you might say. So right now we had plugged in 350,000. If you remember last year, it was 340,000. In addition to that, we do have the admin fees, a couple lines above that at about 12.8. If you may remember, that was a little over 11,000 last year. So that's what's already been plugged into the budget with regard to where we're at with that. The other expenses, Paula has expended out to the individual budgets. And I think we talked about that last week when we got together. So she allocated to the individual budgets, the employee health insurance for those various departments. Do you have anything, Paula, you want to add to that other to wrap up the health insurance conversation?
No, if you roll down like to the county clerk, you can, right there, the health insurance. So for that department, it's 71,000. Each one, it depends on how many people are in there. I built a spreadsheet that takes how many, the people in that department and which level of insurance they take. So if they take health, family insurance, it's higher. If they have a whole department of single people, which over half of our employees only take single. So I don't remember what the exact
That's in
percentage
large
was.
part because we
Yeah.
did pass a policy that said if your spouse has the ability to get their insurance through their workplace, they are required to take that.
So, each department just varies depending on what level of coverage those employees happen to be taking.
Would it be possible to have a similar presentation for the employees? 'Cause I mean, all they see is, deductible and what I pay every month for health insurance.
In fact, at the insurance committee meeting earlier this week, Tom can attest to the fact that we did talk about how is it that we do communicate better to employees about the benefit that they are receiving. I don't know that employees were aware. I don't know that administration was aware of the envision piece not being covered before. It is a benefit and it's a benefit they've been getting for a few years now. So we think that communication would be a really good tool. I will tell you though, what we also talked about at the health insurance committee meeting earlier this week was during open enrollment, which occurs in October sometime, employees are always invited to come and discuss and have questions answered about their health insurance. And we invite the health insurance representatives to come in, the ones that really are in the know about the program. And last year, the participation, I think we had, 3 people show up to these meetings and they're held across the street and here and at the highway. We just don't get strong participation from employees. So that's a challenge we've got to figure out how to overcome.
I wonder if like a 1-page, to all employees, here's our cost, here's your cost, I mean, you could summarize a lot of that, break it down, just so they know, because I mean, it is a big expense, and it is a great benefit that a lot of people don't realize, and probably a lot of people who haven't seen it.
Yep, we agree. And I think, again, Tom, you can add whatever, but that's exactly the conversation we had at the insurance committee meeting, that we need to reiterate just exactly what a benefit it is to have this health insurance with a $500, deductible for single coverage is a good benefit.
So I was a little surprised. I don't know about you guys, but I was a little surprised in regards to the HSA component we could potentially offer that you could bounce back and forth. That really, to me, that is a disincentive for us, because I would look at a way of offering that HSA component to mitigate the risk that Rick was raising in going forward, because that component is always, that envision self-insurance side, that exposure is just going to go up over time. But if you offered, if a younger employee wanted to go the HSA route, I thought there would be some restrictions on how you could bounce back and forth. And the way Brad described it, there really isn't. So that really puts a disincentive for us to really promote that type of program. I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong in thinking that, but that's the way that struck me today. That conversation. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I had a couple questions specific to lots. Are they under the employees out there? Are they under our insurance plan?
Yes.
Oh, couple.
So So the grant pays the employer portion of the grant pays. the
That was
employer
that was my
portion.
question is, as far as the envision part of it, are we getting reimbursed from lots for any exposure there? Because it's my understanding this lots was not supposed to really become any burden on the county. It was supposed to be paid for.
No, that's a good point, actually. They are not picking up the envision piece.
Okay, so that'd be one part of it. And then the second part of the question is with the formation of the new rural transportation district, I mean, they will be leaving the group, I would think.
They'll
And
be
I,
on their own to find insurance.
and I didn't know what effect that would have on the envision side of it specifically. I mean, if any, I mean, because it's all based on individual.
I mean,
history.
there's only two people out there. So, you know, however much of
No,
that.
the
deductible
drivers,
they-
and they're not eligible, part-time drivers.
The only employees that they have, they're paid through the county. Everybody else is paid through Hughes temps.
Okay.
So we're probably not talking significant.
This was asking.
Yeah, that was a good question. So. Yeah, Tom.
And to your point, the plan was, we initially went with this insurance, was 2 years later to come back and offer that other policy. And between changing people on the board, changing people, changing board chairmans, it just never got addressed.
You mean as far as the HSA?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They offered that to us initially. They said we could do that. They said, let's get the one up and running and everything going, and we'll come back to it. They said, we'll do 2 years, we'll come back. Well, by then we lost our contact with them. I mean, it's just, but it was originally planned for them to do that. So I don't think it'd be difficult on their end to do that.
But then you'd have to develop the materials as Tim,
Well,
to explain to the employees how that would work. And we'd also have to make a board decision on what incentivizing, we would do. And
I'm
we'd
just
want
saying
to
the
know
plan.
what would make sense.
I'm saying the plan was there to at least look into it and try to bring it to the board back. That's good.
Based on your direction, I can continue to work with Brad to develop a proposal that you might consider and perhaps with his years of expertise and analysis on, like you said, Jim, the challenge of allowing them back in a year later. And is it really going to be beneficial on the administration side of things? I can work with him for that further discussion if you want.
Well, and besides that, and I guess we would need to know from the pool perspective that maybe they deal with this and this is not a non-issue. But if you've got employees that are bouncing back and forth, somebody's got to be tracking that, because number one, once they come back, like Brad said, and I knew that was the case. Once you're back within the plan, you can't contribute to an HSA. So, and I don't know how much of that you would have, but I still got to think that there has to be some benefit long-term for the county in the envision piece. Our self-insurance aspect is if employees have built up enough money in their HSA account to take care of their routine needs, that's going to eliminate that exposure for us in our self-insurance program.
So I think that the point was made through the process here that as a government entity, we tend to have an older demographic. So the individuals that would probably most be interested in an HSA program and the higher deductible are those that are younger and really don't have health issues. So that also needs to be factored into this. If we've got an older population, is there going to be that many people interested in this anyway? So that's also something that
Well,
needs to be.
where I see that being in our maintenance department and the transportation, as our older guys retire off and we're bringing new employees in, in that respect. So
Well, like I said, I can follow up with Brad and we can formalize a proposal that you can consider. The importance for this month, and now it looks like we don't need a decision, but the importance for this month is prior to September 1st, we had to notify the pool if we were going to stay in the pool or not. the Health Insurance Committee recommendation was that we stay in the pool and proceed forward and potentially explore this idea of the HSA program. So we do not need to notify the pool. We do not necessarily need action on this committee as long as you agree with the decision. But we're going to have it on your agenda for your regular Finance Committee agenda in August, just to solidify that decision. But the key part of this was that September 1st timeline. We've got a little bit of time to come back and present a proposal on the HSA if that's something you want to consider.
Okay. Any comments from the committee? Hearing none. Jess, you missed out a riveting presentation on health insurance and actuarially sound accounting and all that good stuff. I'm sure you just were totally disappointed that you missed that presentation. So come on up and.
So we've got a spot saved just for you up front, Jesse. Come on up.
Right here.
So just to give the committee a little bit of a heads up, I did speak with Jesse earlier via email upon the first initial review of his budget. The only thing that, as we've told you before, our focus is going to be on those areas that saw dramatic change, and Jesse had one of those areas. His part-time line item for this year was budgeted 18,000 and he's looking for 33,500. So Jesse and I have communicated about that, but one of the things that we wanted him to talk to you about or share with you is the reasoning behind that. So with that, I'll tag it off to you.
Basically, it's just I need the help. And I would say since I've been coroner since 2008, I've been running every other week, 7 days a week, and just tired and I want the help. I've got a deputy now that'll work every other weekend. And I've hired another deputy that'll work the other weekend during the months. And I'm running Monday through Friday, 24 hours a day, unless I'm out of town for class or vacation. So but that's basically the reason I want the extra, I need the extra help. So
in your part-time, how do you compensate them? Is it just a fee or is it so?
They're
much
on call.
if they get on call?
they're on call from, right now it's set up to be on call 4:30 PM Friday night, all the way till 4:30 AM Monday morning.
And how much do they get for just being on call? Do they get more?
They
if
get
go out on call?
No, they get $115 a day,
That's
so-
considered 2 days?
2.5 days. So
How much a day?
115 divided out, they get $4.79 an hour to stay in the county, to be on call,
Thank you.
which is a little asinine in my thinking too, but so I'd pay them more, but they deserve more.
Jesse, you're looking at adding another part-time person.
Correct. Just for the weekend.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Are you having any trouble getting part-time?
No, well, it is a little difficult trying to find somebody to work for the coroner's office just in general, but no, for the deputies that I have now, 2 of them work full-time. One's a cop, Tom Lehman. The other is Mike Lally, retired fireman who works at the hospital during the days. And then another one is Tim Godbold, who is between jobs right now. But he's young, like I am, works full-time. And then the other is my employee at the funeral home. So I have 4 total, but 2 of them technically, well, 3 of them really. I mean, they have jobs, so full-time jobs. So basically they're just on call when I need somebody to be on call. But starting now, I'd like to be that I have 2 deputies that are going to run every other weekend. So
Just on your contractual services, you bumped that up 10,000.
I did. That is for reasoning that we stopped using KSB Hospital for the morgue. And so now we're traveling to Ogle County to store bodies or have autopsies. We're paying Ogle County $300 every autopsy that we do up there. So that's basically for maintenance on the car, to have somebody run a body up there, storage, autopsy fee up there too. So,
I use the new vehicle that you got.
pardon me?
That's for the new vehicle that you got.
Yeah, we use that vehicle. Yeah. So
We got more use out of it. That's good.
correct. So,
KSB just didn't want us? Or-
no, it's just a agreement between both of us that they don't have enough space over there, and two, it's a safety liability for the actual coolers that they have.
I know there've been some conversations.
So we just decided we're done. And for the safety of my deputies, because honestly, if they're over there on call, they don't have a health insurance suit here, they do get hurt. It's just a lot safer for us to go to Ogle County. There's no lifting, there's no bending over, putting a body in a blower cooler. It's safer on their staff too at KSB. So we just came to the agreement that we're done over there. So occasionally we'll use it, maybe once a month if we need it, but I've got storage facility, refrigeration at the funeral home. So if I need to put a body in refrigeration, then I'll do it at the funeral home. So I won't mess with KSB. So that's the only two line items that I've changed or that I'd like changed. So.
Any other further questions for Jeff? Go ahead, Brad.
Just an observation, I guess. We had Paul in here the other day and he was taking all the telephone expense, but I see we got a telephone expense here. Is this one got overlooked or is this something different? The reason why it's in this budget, or?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, that telephone for my budget is for the answering service after hours. So when Lori's not in the office, phones are transferred to an answering service at night. So
That's coming up.
no, the actual out at the LEC. Yeah, out of the law enforcement.
Is that just a flat monthly rate or is it based on
Typically,
calls? Or-
it's based on calls, but it varies maybe pennies a month. So it's not.
I just expended $1,000 and got 5,000. I know it's just an easy round number, but I didn't know.
Yeah, no, it varies maybe just pennies every month, maybe dollars. So not much. So. And I don't know, it would help if we could eliminate that, if they could figure out the new phone system to where if we could run everything through the dispatch like Ogle County does. So Ogle County runs all their calls through dispatch, and then dispatch will notify the coroner that's on call and where they need to be. So I don't know how I'd have to talk to IT to figure out all that and ask dispatch if they'd be willing to do that too. But
That was company on board, so they-
right. So, but that was something I thought of too. So,
and it's working out okay. Eliminated stuff. You had to find some stuff. Do that a couple years ago.
yeah, I just have a desk.
That's working.
Oh, yeah. So the only thing, I mean, I'm trying to put together some numbers for an actual morgue. I know I talked to Bob and Mr. Wilson at one time.
You talked about that a couple years ago.
Well, he said they might have room in the old jail. I don't know what they're doing with that. So it's an idea. I'm just trying to I do have a meeting set up in the next couple of weeks with a lady that will come in and see what kind of room we do have to work with. And then she can put together a morgue for us plan. I did pull Ogle County. They asked for Ogle County's blueprints. So I gave them Mr. Wilson. I don't know if he's looked at them.
Where's Oklahoma?
Do you know where the new Hunt Club is, restaurant on the river? It's the Hunt Club, that
Yeah.
restaurant. It's right across the street. It's right on the river,
Oh, really?
on the river there. Yeah. It's combined with the sheriff's department. They built a new
Okay, all right,
building. So
okay.
Kind of capacity they have mobile.
they just put a new cooler in that'll hold 8 bodies. And then their old cooler system, they moved that to the garage, which he can hold 9. So
What would you be looking?
I would say anywhere from 5 to 8. So I don't need a ton of room, but it would be nice. What I would do is get away from those old coolers like we have at KSP, where you're sliding people in and out of. You would want everything flush to the ground, put them on a table, wheel them right into the cooler, wheel them right out to have an autopsy. You're not picking bodies up. You're not bending over like you were at KSP, hurting people. So
Do you know off the top of your head, Jess, how many autopsies are we doing a year?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know. For the month of August, I'm up to 4 already, and it's August 4th. So
You're how many?
4 for the month right now.
Okay.
And so it all depends. I really can't put a number on it. I'd have to go back and look. Last year we did 291 calls ran through the office, total calls. That's hospice cases, accidents, suicides, everything. So but I'd have to go back and give you an idea of how many.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had, it's always the case of when you think about, building your own facilities versus if Ogle County is agreeable to keep us going up there, which is.
I think they will. I just don't know if it's a permanent solution for them. I think it was more of a temporary agreement. So, but right now we're paying them $300 every time we use it. So today I've got an autopsy at noon. So for the gentleman that we found in the river.
So you have to run back up there.
So yeah, I'll go back up today.
And
So
doctor they have,
no, he uses, they're the same pathologist that we use. So our pathologist, Dr. Peters, that runs pretty much, I would say 8, 9 counties northern.
so there's no additional cost to be up there.
No, it's just the extra money we're paying Ogle County. So.
You know what percentage statewide counties that have their own versus don't?
I know just our area around here, Whiteside doesn't have their own morgue. They use CGH. Rock Island County comes to us because they don't have a morgue. As big as Rock Island County is, they don't have their own morgue. They don't have their own pathologist. So they use the same pathologist as we do. Bureau County comes to us.
Now you say they come to you for the autopsy?
They used to come to KSB for autopsies. Now we're sending everybody to Ogle County. So like I've been to Peoria before, Peoria County on certain cases. I've been to Will County, certain cases, and they charge me for the use of the morgue, the pathologist, an aide to help the pathologist. So if we had our own morgue here, then I could at least generate some money by having those counties come to here. Like Rock Island would pay, Bureau would pay. I don't know about Whiteside County. I don't know how many autopsies Joe does over there, but so you could charge other counties for the use of the morgue. I don't know how much money you actually generate a year, but it's some. I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess. So.
Go ahead, Greg.
But I just went back to your salary part-time, so I understand you got 2 part-time deputies now, plus yourself.
We have 4.
4?
Yes,
And you want to add 1?
correct. I have 4 total.
I don't know that he wants to add a
I don't want to
person.
add any more.
He wants to add hours.
Right.
He wants to add.
So, but I mean, currently you've got 2 that have been alternating. No, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
So there's 1 and myself have been alternating.
Okay.
So I'm going to work Monday through Friday. My other 2 are going to double or take on the weekends. And the other one's more or less a floater. So when he can work, he tells us when he's available. So
So basically, the new or the added hours would be what you're currently covering.
correct.
These numbers are in the budget. You correct?
Correct.
Come back to that then. If I did the math correct, and that's what I want to understand. If they pick up half the weekends, 0.6, then times 2.5 times 215, about $7,500. So fair that we can just reduce that or add 7,500 rather than 15,000.
Well, you'd have, that's for one deputy.
Yeah.
So you'd have to times that by 2.
But you already got one doing it.
Correct. Okay, I see what you're
So
saying.
it's only one, it's only covering your hours.
Correct,
for
correct. Sorry.
26 weeks.
Yes, correct.
I mean, I'm just trying
Yes.
to, 'cause we're looking at a deficit, so I'm just trying to shave whatever we
Right.
can and realistic. So, I mean, I don't want to try, not trying to pick short, but I'm just trying to get to a real number, so.
So what was the number you had, Rick?
74, 75, so if an 8,000 or something like that, I think that
8,000 on the over the 18,000 he had budgeted last year.
if that's, I just wanted, but yeah, that's, should get him there, I think.
Jesse, do you want to let that percolate and do the math and get back to us if
That's
there's any
fine, sure.
concerns with that? Or are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with it. So,
So I just want to make sure I did the math.
Yeah.
and understood correctly.
Any other questions or Jesse, anything else you wanted to point out about your budget?
no, I'm good.
All right. Well, Jess, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
guys.
Appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So now you're in the hot seat.
Right, so
Wendy's in the hot seat.
So the only other budget we had scheduled for today is the board chairman's budget. We did have, excuse me, the treasurer's office, but they went ahead and went on Tuesday because we had some extra time. So you're down to this budget and then you're free to go for today. So with that said, oh, you know what I should have done? Thanks, Paula. You're gonna go down and scroll. Thank you. I didn't do that. So we'll let Paula catch you up with the board chairman's budget. I'll give you a couple highlights of things. So as you know, you've made some decisions over the last year. You're going to go down to a 20-member board, but you've also changed the per diem to $80 per meeting versus it was $60 per day. So we also know that coming before the board this month will be some consideration to restructure committees. So the per diem amount was quite frankly just a crapshoot, to tell you the truth. So we've plugged in about $70,000. Last year it was 65,000. I'm totally okay if you want to disagree with my number. It's just a crapshoot because at this point, we don't know how many committees we're going to have. I just plug that in as a placeholder. If you want some wiggle room there, that might be a place to talk about, but probably not a great deal of wiggle room, but it'd be something. All right. Salary officer is the salary for myself. Salary full-time, I'm going to set that aside for right now and I'm going to come back to it. County board stipends is the next one. If you remember, you did approve stipends now, not just for the board chairman, which went to $8,400 per year. You also approved a $1,200 stipend for the vice chair and $600 stipends per year for the committee chairs. So that number went from $6,000 when we were just giving a stipend to the board chair to now $13,200. That's why you're seeing that increase. I do want to point out that we have in here the tourism budget, which is money comes in and money goes out. I talked to Paula about why that's in the board chairman's office, and her answer was, well, there's really not a better place to put it. So that's money that flows in and money that flows back out, of which the county receives a portion of that. Is that fair to say, Paula? All right. All right. Consultants. We took the consultant line item from 36,000 budgeted last year to 25,000 this year. Notice our year to date is quite low. Largely that was because in the consultants, by the way, was your health insurance consultant, the Brad that you just heard from this morning. So that was part of it for the current year. We were also paying an HR firm by the name of Sickich to do quite a bit of the HR work. They did a little bit of work in December, but effective January 1. The administrator role took over the largely those responsibilities. We do still have a contract with Sickich if we get into anything that is in depth. Primarily what I've been handling has been the Family Medical Leave Act process and paperwork, which is a pain, but it's working well right now with having the administrator handle that. However, I've highlighted that because just recently, just as recent as last week, after I submitted this budget, the question came up, and in fact, you will be hearing this regular meeting of finance in August. You're going to be hearing from Ryan Harrison. Ryan is interested in helping us quote our property liability insurance. Much like our health insurance, we're in a pool for property liability. That's the CIRMA pool. And he is interested in pursuing, quoting that. So if we're going to do that, we need to go through the same process that we just went through for health insurance. While albeit health insurance is much more complex, but if you're going to do that, you're going to hire a consultant to walk us through that, to go out for bid on that and allow Ryan and others to bid on that, then we probably need to adjust this back upwards a little bit. To be honest, this came up so recently, I haven't had time to research the cost. For right now, what I'm talking about is, as a placeholder at least, is to take that from the 25,000 I earlier estimated, reducing it because of the sickage reduction. I'm talking about taking it back up to approximately $8,000 to $10,000. That is if you, this finance committee, give me the direction that you do want to go through a similar process with the property liability. And again, you're going to have that conversation at your regular meeting when Ryan Harrison approaches you and says, hey, I'd really like to quote you. And if we're going to do that, we got to go through a bit of a process. So, yes.
Did you say you want to take the 25 back up by 8,000? Okay,
Yep.
just to make sure I understood.
Yep. So I'm proposing that we increase that again. That is only if this committee, the property liability and the health insurance, is under the umbrella of responsibility to this committee, the finance committee. So if you choose to go through that process, then we would want to add that 8,000 to 10,000. If you choose not to, then that's something we can pull back out. So, and I know you haven't heard from Ryan, so I'll let you hear his presentation at the regular meeting, and then you can make a decision on that. But that's why it's highlighted, because it's kind of in flux right now based on your direction. All right. Software licensing, you'll notice before software licensing was 0 and this year it's 13,000. That's because last year, outside of the budget process, you approved onboard. That's what this is costing us per year to have on board, is 13,000 for the software licensing. So with that said, most everything else is generally about the same as where it was in a prior year. I've hit the highlights. The only thing left to talk about is the salary full-time. And you'll notice that went up dramatically. So recently, and some of you attended this meeting, there was a strategic planning meeting of the executive committee. And while we were talking about some best practices and how we get the job done that we need to do here for Lee County, including the conversation that took place about having a financial officer out of the treasurer's office, that conversation segued into what are we going to do when I am no longer in this role? What's our transition going to look like? So I don't know how many of you know this, but my contract will expire essentially July 12th, 2023. So there's no definite as to where that's going to go right now, but that is all I agreed to work when I took on this job. If that comes to fruition, the advice that was being thrown out at that strategic planning meeting is that we need a serious crossover transition training period. I heard everything at that committee from 1 year down to 4 months. I don't know what the right number is. That's something you get to decide. I do think it would be prudent, though, if we don't want to lose the momentum that we've been gaining through a lot of these things. And I'm not taking credit for that. We've had some very proactive board members that have stepped up, and we've got some serious momentum moving forward. If you don't want to lose that momentum, you might want to think about some sort of crossover. What's plugged in here right now is the compromise between the 3 to 4 months and the 1 year perspective from the other day. And it's 6 months. Hire somebody with a 6-month crossover training period of time to become the administrator when I do step down. If that's something you want to consider, then it needs to be built into this budget because in all likelihood, I will be gone by the end of next year. So we need to plan ahead for that. So I'll throw that out for discussion. I don't have anything else about the budget. I'll take any questions you have regarding the budget. And Becky, I know Becky and I worked along with Bob collaboratively on this. If there's anything that you want to say, Becky, regarding the overall budget, go for it. Otherwise, I'll throw it out to you for your comments and questions.
The only other thing that changed was we got in the economic development line item, we got the bill for the Black Hawk Hills RC&D and it was $600 more than what we had budgeted. So if you want to add that.
So instead of 25,000 in the economic development line, it'd be 25,600 or round it to 26, whatever.
But that
Oh, I'm
also-
sorry. I
'cause we
read the wrong,
have
I read the wrong
LCID.
line, Becky. Thank you.
Is what, we're giving 20,000 or we're giving 20,000 to LCIDA?
This year it was 15,000 LCIDA, and then we've got Black Hawk Hills. Yes. I left my laptop over there. It's got all these finite details. So thanks, Becky, for remembering.
Now, do we have Kevin Marks coming for
Yes.
regular finance committee meeting next Thursday?
Actually, I've got him scheduled for the full board meeting. Is that all right? You want him to come to finance?
I wouldn't mind having him come to finance.
I will issue an.
Especially, Rick had made the comment, as we were talking about revenues, and Rick made the comment that he'd heard that the development south of town has been stymied. I'd really like to have some questions answered there and have it done in committee rather than full board.
All right, so
Okay.
I will issue an invitation. We've
See
got,
if he can come next
yes,
Thursday.
to see if his schedule will allow it, but he is scheduled for and has committed to the full board meeting.
Yeah, Rick.
So put you on the spot a little bit, Wendy. I guess going back to, I fully support the transition of your position. I guess my question is looks like you got about 60,000 probably-ish figured for that person. I guess two questions is, have we talked about a proposed salary for your replacement? Is that enough? Is it, just trying to understand this whole thought process, I guess.
So you're absolutely right. I plugged in 60,000. How I got there, and this was a total stab in the dark, and it happened in a 24-hour period after that strategic planning meeting because I hadn't planned for this until I was instructed to do that. Plugged in 60,000. I got there from, I believe I said the salary for that 6 month. If it were a 6 month period of time, that salary would be in the range of 85,000. But they wouldn't be there the entire time. It would be only a 6 month period. That's how I got to the 60,000. Now, my current salary is 102, as I recall. Well, it's in here. Yes, it's 102. It's 102. As to whether or not that salary range would be the same for the administrator when they stepped into the full role, that's really kind of your decision. My expectation was that it would step into that position. Once they got past that kind of interim training, whatever you want to transition period.
So then I guess I turn the question to the executive people that are here. And Jim, maybe you don't want to have this conversation, but I've heard from other board members that our current salary for a administrator is not to where we need to be. Is this? I just want to make sure if this is the plan, we got enough money set aside. Number two, the other thing is, I don't know if we should increase the health insurance line item. If you do put somebody on board, that's going to be an issue as well. So I'm just throwing that out there for discussion.
So when we hit and John, you were there and Doug at the executive. So we talked in generalities because of course it depends on getting the proper candidate.
Sure.
And also I guess my philosophy would be is that, we set Wendy's salary in the aspect of the experience that she had within the county and whatnot. So your balance is that what are you looking for? Are you looking for an experienced person? Are you looking for a less experienced person that we could possibly potentially maybe pay a little bit less? I think what Wendy's proposed is pretty much along the lines of what the executive, the strategic planning meeting. came
I guess where I'm
out.
coming from is say you offer somebody, you think you got to go out and get them 140,000, for example. 6 months is 70. So now we're 10 short if it was going to, that's why I just
Right.
want to make sure that we're reflecting what the true cost is going to be.
So Bob is still trying to get me to stay for a little bit longer. And here's how I put it to him. You know what? Just as what Rick's saying right now, budget for it, maybe put a little extra in the budget. If none of this comes to fruition, it won't matter. It's in the salary line item. It can't be used any other way but this. So if it doesn't come to fruition, so, to Rick's point, if you want to bump it and allow the flexibility for the committee, the hiring committee to make that decision when the time comes based on the experience of the individual, not going to hurt anything to do it. It's up to you. The only thing it's going to hurt is it's going to start impacting your budget deficit. So think about that.
Fully aware, but I mean, you got to be realistic and see what the
Right.
numbers are.
I agree. I don't disagree with doing that. Again, I don't think there's any harm to it except the impact on the overall budget deficit. It does allow you a great deal of flexibility if the right candidate were to come forward. I think mostly what I was concerned about is getting your feedback on the transition period and your consensus, at least, that it makes sense to have a transition period and what that might look like.
So again, maybe I'm turning this back on to Wendy, but if in fact your timetable is July, your full salary wouldn't be
Correct.
in that line item. So
Correct.
it just depends on how much overlap you have and what you paid the candidate coming in. And so.
Yeah. So it was a wild stab in the dark.
I get it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we end up having to come in, and we have to do a budget adjustment, we can do a budget adjustment. As long as it's. within
Assuming you have
reason.
money set aside in contingencies or somewhere.
Yeah,
100,000 now that
Well, I
you gotta
know.
cut from somewhere else.
Well,
so.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, we just gotta make sure you got that.
right,
plan for it. Yep.
right. No, your point's well taken, Rick. I mean, it's, you have to bound, are we close to what our costs will be,
That's why I was
given
asking you guys, what's
expectation.
your expectation for
Yeah.
the replacement?
Right. And that's going to be totally dependent on the candidate, really. So,
Are we hitting the mark, though, with the 6-month overlap transition period? Right now, a regular employee has a probationary period of, and I'm trying to remember because there's a lot of different union contracts, but I believe it to be 6-month probationary period. So that would meet the typical probationary period for someone to come in. The reason I ask that is it's going to factor into when we start looking for this candidate. So I'm looking for your feedback on appropriate transitionary period.
Well, that's the other part of the equation, because technically we don't have any money set aside for this year, but you could start the process right now with a candidate starting shortly after the first of the year. 6 months comes into your timetable, if in fact you're only going to stay till that point in time. But if you're going to stay till December, then do you start the process in January and try to find somebody, blah, blah, blah. Because it's
It takes.
last time it was 6 months, 8 months, and then we got turned down and it was just fiasco. So
Mhm.
I'd say the sooner the better. And that's my personal opinion.
I don't have anything else unless there's any other questions on that or anything else on the budget.
any other questions for Wendy? Well, thank you, Wendy.
Absolutely. Is there anything else from the committee's perspective you'd like to discuss today? Otherwise, we had nothing else scheduled.
Okey-doke. Does committee have anything else want to discuss? We've got the time now. We're here. So there's some burning thought, maybe not necessarily anything that we've covered today, that we covered Tuesday. Now, go ahead, Tom.
Apply to the budget, but going off of Jesse's comment, we need to have somebody get with Paul? I mean, how do we want to, we can save some money sending these calls through the center rather than, I mean,
Yeah, I didn't quite understand
well,
that
no, but I hate
whole,
to see things presented and then drop off where there's an opportunity to make life better for him,
I mean,
possibly some savings for the county, even if it's minuscule.
well, and besides that, we just spent all this money for a phone system.
Yes.
Why isn't everybody
Why we're using it.
congruent on that?
Right, I'd
So,
rather than have it just drop here, we also, oh, that's nice. What do we need to do to bring that
Yeah,
forward?
our phone system has nothing to do with 911's phone system. I mean, they're a different company.
Okay.
yeah,
But he said
yeah,
that
but
there was
even
no way
having
you
said
can be
that,
Notified or something.
The- yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
I
that-
thought it was
if-
the message center to take the calls. It wasn't the phone system itself that was in question. Maybe I misunderstood. What did you guys pick up on that I missed?
Well, I would assume if there's a death, it would go to 911. I mean, maybe I don't know.
Asking for help. And I don't want us to ignore that. I think we need to out whoever needs helping. And I guess I didn't get enough information to feel comfortable with it. Hoping somebody else maybe did, but I mean, that's part of.
Well,
these
I didn't get-
Hearings, we do this, make things better.
I didn't get I thought I thought it's something I'd follow up with Paul or
Okay,
911
so-
with. Because I can't hardly believe that message service is going to cost us $5,000 or anywhere
That's
close to
what-
that.
I mean, if it's-
So how about I do a little research and report back at one of your next meetings? I can,
Yeah, and see if there's an
alternative.
alternative and a more,
I don't
yeah.
think it's right to have him bring that up and us not follow through with something to try and.
sure.
I just misunderstood what he was saying, I think. So I wasn't picking up on what you're saying. So I will follow up with him and Paul or whoever else, and I'll report back. I will say that your next meeting is next Tuesday, and it's a big one. Again, I think I already shared this with you. We would rather have not had all these big topics on Tuesday's meeting, but none of these individuals were available any other day but Tuesday. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, you've got community services on Monday night. Thank you, Rick. So I didn't mislead anybody. What time is that? 7 p.m.? 7 p.m. What I was thinking of is the next budget hearings with department heads, which is Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So I'll see what I can get together on this topic with Jesse for next week.
At some point. It doesn't- Don't break your back doing it. It's just, I just hate to see it drop because it meant enough to him to bring it up and I think we ought to follow it.
Well, and if you look at his, so far, what he spent year to date on that $5,000 line item is just shy of $1,000. Last year's his actual was 3,400. 3,400 seems that if that all that is the messaging service, what was that? That's $300 a month for a messaging service. That seems steep. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Jim, I wasn't going just about the savings, but I think that something that means that much to him to bring it up, that we can make his life easier. Why would we want to do that? Pick up on that, and take advantage of it.
Oh, right. So, yeah, because he mentioned about what Ogle County did.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay.
So
For the regularly scheduled finance meeting, yes, please speak into the mic.
So for the agenda for the 9th, I have the approval of the financial officer, which I'm going to add along with the 3 departments that we're meeting with. Correct? I thought you wanted him at finance.
I thought that's. sorry.
No, this is for the 9th,
Oh,
the meeting on the 9th, the 3rd day budget hearings.
gotcha.
So I'm going to add that on top of the 3 departments that we're meeting with. Right? The highway,
You lost me. I thought you were talking about the regular meeting.
no.
Why
Well,
are-
I have to post the agenda for the 9th.
Right,
today.
so, I know, we were talking about the financial officer, because we didn't have it on the agenda, therefore couldn't take action on Tuesday. Sorry, Becky. You see why she's valuable around here? She keeps everybody on track. Yes,
So I'm going to add that. Do you want anything about the administrator on there? Because we can't take any action if it's not on the agenda. That's why I'm asking.
I'd like to see where we, after we get through all the hearings, where we end up at, and then take action on these things once we get the final product in front of us, and then we can make adjustments and decisions based on what we end up with. That's where I'd rather see it.
Okay, so we don't want that on the agenda then? I just want to make sure I have posted on there.
I mean, we've already got it in the budget. I think that we need to finalize it at some point in time and then talk about it, whatever day that is, if that's next week, or if there's another meeting subsequent after we meet with the 3 department heads. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
So in regards to the finance director, what she's asking about was simply us giving formal transparent authority for Paul to start looking for that person that, contingent upon, but so it really has no budget impact.
Well, it does in the point that they've got a number set aside for the salary.
Yeah, and we will do, yes.
But I just didn't, if for some reason, and I'm just, since we're talking about, say we shave 5,000 off that position, I didn't want Paul
it
going
wouldn't
out.
affect the authority that we'd be giving him in regards to the motion.
Okay, I mean, and that's fine. I'm just saying to me, I would like to discuss this after everything was, all the pieces to the puzzle were together.
So your
Well-
next meeting after the 9th, to Rick's point, if that's when you want to talk about it, and it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but your next meeting is August 30th. So the end of this month, we've got a meeting for budget wrap up, and potentially we'll talk about the levy at that time.
So
So
we could schedule something after the 9th too. I mean, in all real.
yes, you could.
Yeah.
I would think that it really doesn't make that much difference to Paul. As far, he wants to be able to go out and get it. Yeah,
I'm just talking about it in general, the whole thing.
Right.
That's my point.
right. I think, as far as the budget impact goes, us giving him the authority of starting that position. The question would be is what if we decide not to fund that position? And then as far as Paul would do, he just pull the post. So it's not locking us into anything. All right. What's the consensus of the committee? Do we leave, Becky wants to form the agenda. Do we want to have the finance? And even if we have it on the agenda, we really don't have to do anything with it. We can always table it to a later date. So let's go ahead and put it on there and yeah, put it on and yep, there you go. So both those positions will be on there. Okay, anything else from the committee? Hearing none, entertain motion to adjourn. Moved by Forrester, second by Kitson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.